another episode of Beautiful Subconscious. I'm Shell Marie, and today I am very excited to introduce to you our guest, Angela Smith. Angela Smith is a soul-led, spirit-driven individual with over 30 years in healthcare. Her background spans in pregnancy, birth, and emergency nursing, and she has always had a deep passion for natural health. Over the past decade, Ange has seen firsthand how crucial it is to take charge of our well-being. And she's now on a mission to help others feel vibrant, beautiful, and confident by empowering them to take control of their physical, mental, and emotional health. Welcome, Ange.
Hi, thank you.
I'm so grateful to have you on today's episode. I found you through Facebook, and I think just what your background and helping women through such a majestic part of, I know that was in your previous sort of years where you were helping women in their most magical, majestic time of their lives where they're giving birth. And I just love to unpack that, especially because I loved my pregnancy and I loved going through labor. I think that was the pivotal moment of this trajectory in this line of work. So I am really excited to chat to you. But before we get started, as always on every episode, we draw out an intentional card. So, Ange, can you just let me know when to stop?
Now.
Okay, cool. Today's intention is I am pure power. I love that. That is very much, I think in alignment to what you do and what you represent and the gifts that you share and helps people with throughout the world. So I would love to learn about you. So Ange, for the people who are yet to know you and what you do and your background, can you just give us a little intro in your background and your story?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thanks for having me. And for those of you that don't know me, my name is Angela, but I prefer Ange, or most people call me Ange. I feel like I'm in trouble if people say Angela.
My sister's name's Angela. I only ever call her Ange. It's so weird when I
it's funny, hey. So yeah, as you sort of briefly touched on, my the beginning part of my journey was as a nurse and a midwife. So for as long as I can remember, I always wanted to be a midwife and work with babies. I was always, as a child, I was always drawn to babies. I was like a beacon, and I would go up to them, and I knew from a very young age that I wanted to help people. And becoming a midwife was it took me a long time to get there, and so it was a huge achievement for me. And I guess the thing that I loved the most about it is that you're working with women and couples. And for those of you that don't know, midwife means with woman.
I love that.
And, you can apply midwife to anything really, because it's part of transformation and, all those sorts of things. But I think the thing that I felt most privileged and honoured in being a midwife was that you're part of a woman's journey, but part of a couple's journey when they're at their most vulnerable. And I think, it's such a privilege to be part of someone's raw journey, and you don't see that very often. In our day-to-day life, people often have a bit of a mask on and don't always share, the depth of what's going on inside. And I think from a midwifery point of view, I had the privilege of being part of that, and there's not really much that comes close to that.
Yeah.
And so, it was very, very special for me. And I just dabble in it now. I don't work a lot of hours in midwifery per se, and I don't really work in the hospitals anymore, but it's still a part of what I do.
Oh, that's beautiful. And absolutely, to be involved with a couple's journey, an early family, a young family's journey when they are in their most vulnerable, there is very rare amounts of opportunities where that's the case. And I think that is such a magical time to be a part of. And in those moments, I like speaking for myself, when I was in labor, it's just, you are taken on to another dimension, another plane, and you're not really, and to have the people that are in and around you and supporting you and keeping you grounded, and having those people who are experienced and heart driven in those spaces, you're just so thankful. So it is such a magical thing. And I've never actually thought about it that way, but yeah, you're right. That would be just such a wonderful experience to be able to share with people.
Yeah, from the midwifery point of view, and just being allowing women to get in that space that you talk about.
Yeah.
So especially you see that when women are really well supported and they don't have effects coming in. If you allow a woman to labour like that, we call it labour land, or you can actually see a woman going off to that place sort of really embodied in what's going in within. And it's, it's a very
Wow.
magical to see.
Yeah, I love that you like identify, and you can actually see when they are somewhat, transcending to wherever it is that they go. And I think having that, like, and I know you are going to touch on, like, a bit of your journey into what led you to go down the natural health line and be that soul-led, spirit-driven individual. But I'm imagining, like, whether you were really conscious of it or not, as when you're a midwifery, to be able to still witness that and identify that, having those, I think, I don't know, spiritual connections, or those ways that you can reference, that would be pretty incredible. I would have loved to have you as my midwife.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it was. It's very, very special.
Yeah. There was one thing before we tie in, like with my son, I will never forget this midwife. And I swear she was the one that had helped me, unbeknowingly at the time, pivot to be more in this direction of understanding your body's intelligence and really being open to that and just trusting in it. Was after my son Ryder was born, and I had already had my daughter Shire 2 years earlier, both natural. And with Shire's afterwards, though, I remember the midwife is saying, like, she's got to feed soon, or put her on your chest. So when Ryder came out, I naturally wanted to help him latch on for his first feed. And there was a midwife who had said, just put him in the center of your chest and he will find the way there. And in my head, I was like, he has just had a bit of a journey coming out. I'm happy to help him. Like, the kid has just gone through a bit of a mission getting out here. So if it means I can help him latch, but she's just like, just trust. Like, she said something very, like, it caught my attention.
Yeah.
Even in that moment, she's like, just trust we know what we're doing with this, or trust the human instinct, or something like that. And I was like, what? And so Ryder's, obviously the newborn's eyes are barely open, and he's like lifting his head up, like trying to lift it as best as he can as a fresh newborn baby. And I just remember holding and watching. I'm like, how the heck is he going to go from being vertical and upright and just horizontal and latching, and how witnessing him lift and bob his head to, like, have his mouth somewhat open, to then must have instinctively smelt the nipple or the milk, to then allow himself to drop down to the side and latch so perfectly. I was like, holy shit, we are so powerful. Why am I getting in the way of this? Like, why am I getting in the way of this innate power?
And that's a beautiful gift that she gave you too, because you don't often nowadays, especially depending on where you're having your baby, can really impact that. And I think often women also give themselves over to someone, not someone else, but they don't trust their instincts enough.
They give their power away quite easily, and understandably, in a sense, because they're the professional, they know, and you're in such that vulnerable state that you just want to make the right decision.
Yeah, and if everything's well and normal, and giving someone the time and the space to allow that to happen, that's what nature intended.
Yeah.
And so that's, a beautiful gift that you were given.
Yeah, I for sure remember, and I'm like, she has changed the way that I'm seeing life now. It's just incredible. So I would love to learn then, with, your background in midwifery, and you also expressed that you had a passion for natural health. I guess, what was the drive to, and the inspiration to build and further your career more in the trajectory of natural health?
Well, I don't know if it was within my conscious awareness at the time, or my own sort of path. I think if I'd just been left where I was, maybe things would have just continued as they were. I'm not sure. But as I said, I have always had that natural affinity for natural health. And 10 years ago, we moved overseas to France, and I wasn't allowed to work there. And I got very sick while I was over there. So I wasn't 100% bedridden, but I was almost bedridden for a year.
Sorry to hear that.
And so there wasn't, I was, stuck in this beautiful country that I'd had all these plans of these magical things that I was going to do. And I, didn't really have a lot of the energy to do a lot of what I wanted to do. So it was a very difficult place to be initially. And so I started I was already doing meditation, but I started doing a lot of meditation and focusing on my own healing. And I did a lot of extra research on how I could nourish my body and get myself back to better health. And so I got on to eating in an autoimmune type of way to reduce inflammation in the body. And that's really the trigger that started the process, I guess. And when I came back to Australia, I did some extra study in nutritional medicine. And I've also done intuitive medicine because I'm a big believer that our emotions and our mind have a very, very big link to what's happening physically in the body. And so I wanted to integrate all of that into, my profession, I guess. And it's just organically grown, I guess. Like there's been some paths that I've gone off and nothing's happened. And then I've come back and then my eldest daughter about 6 years ago also was diagnosed with a blood disorder and she became very ill. We nearly lost her. And so I became extremely driven to, find out as much as I could in helping people with chronic conditions or autoimmune conditions or people that go around and around in circles in the normal Western medical model and still can't get any answers. And so really that's sort of the journey that brought me to where I am today. And it looks different all the time and we all grow in different ways. And I guess I've brought in bits of my journey and I've brought in, bits of being a mother and watching my daughter, almost losing my daughter and how that impacted me and also how she felt as a patient in a system that really was not really able to help her from a holistic point of view and just try and integrate that into my healing and wellness.
Wow. Well, firstly, thank you for sharing. And I'm sorry to hear about your health in France and devastatingly almost losing your daughter. I can't imagine what that would have been like. That would have just absolutely floored me. And I'm sure it would have felt that way for you.
Yeah.
And so I guess with seeing just not being able to get the answers that you were seeking in the usual, I guess, conventional realms, what did you feel helped you the most? So you're saying, I guess, nutritional medicine helped you to calm the inflammation within your body. Did you ever manage to find out where might that inflammation or what had contributed to that inflammation? Like, how did you move out of that space?
So I guess it comes from a number of things. When we look at functional wellness, we look at things like, your nutrition, your lifestyle, what's going on around you, your emotions, stress, and that sort of thing. And I guess when you look at that, if you're only addressing one of those things and all the other things are out of balance, you're not properly going to heal. And for me, initially, I was just looking at the nutrition point of view because I had been treated with some medications and I had high levels so when they do blood tests, they can test sort of inflammatory markers in your blood and my inflammatory markers were through the roof. So from a diagnostic point of view, I could see that, but also I could tell by how I felt in my body. And so I suppose my first step was to just do what I could with what I knew, which was what I was putting into my body. And so that was the first thing. I was not having any packaged foods and things like that, and really just having fresh meat, chicken, fish, vegetables and fruit. And that was what I had for about 5 months. It was extremely difficult, but yeah, look, it really helped. And then when I came back to Australia, there was obviously, you know, I think we're always having to work on ourselves. And I just felt quite disconnected in a way from my body. I felt like when I was living in France, I had quite a spiritual, I felt very connected to something more. Is all I can say. I'm not exactly sure how to describe it. And I felt quite lost when I came back to Australia.
Yeah, wow.
I felt very disconnected, and I was looking for different ways to feel that, you know, get that feeling back, I suppose.
Sure.
And that's what led me down the path of, you know, looking at emotional stuff and intuitive stuff and not disregarding messages. You know, so when we feel things in our body, pains, or, you know, for people that are not sure of energy and things like that, it's often disregarded. But most of the time, if we take notice of what we feel and we allow ourselves to feel what's happening in our bodies, it can actually be a message to help us.
Oh, yes.
And so that's, I guess, was part of my healing journey, because I needed to address those things in my life as well to help me.
Amazing.
Yeah.
There was something you said earlier that I was like, oh, that's a great, when you said there was inflammation in your body and you could see it on a diagnostic sort of report or assessment, but then you also knew how you felt. If people didn't know somewhat what inflammation felt like, how would you describe it?
Okay, so inflammation can feel like so many things. It can be pain, so pain that you wake up, headaches, itchy skin, eating something that gives you a bloated tummy, or getting rashes that come out of nowhere and you think, oh, I must have an allergic reaction, but you don't know what it's come from and all your blood tests are sort of normal. You know, fatigue, brain fog, so not being able to think clearly, or you have a word in your mind, or you had this thing that you were going to do next in a few minutes' time and it's completely gone out of your brain. So we call that brain fog, or, you know, people have probably heard of that. So they can actually all be signs of inflammation.
Oh my gosh. And so many people would be experiencing that and considering that as normal. And that's what is I guess the biggest space for us to really shine some light to is what everyone has become normalized with is not in fact how we're supposed to operate. And I think, you know, the stressful spaces that we live in and the pressures that we put ourselves under to achieve and to have XYZs in our lives. And that is creating and cultivating like inflammation in our body, which then can look and be experienced as brain fog. So then, you know, we understand a lot of people would then go to get a coffee to, you know, get some energy and to keep going, when really they're going against the grain of what their body is really calling for, right? It's just like we need that rest. We need that hydration. We need that beautiful, wholesome food in that space, and that, you know, all those things that counter what they intuitively think is what's needed.
Yeah. Another big one that I didn't mention, which is really important, is mental health. So if we are inflamed, it will directly impact our mood, and what we eat also directly impacts our mood. So if, you know, we're stressed or we're inflamed, our gut is going to be imbalanced, and our gut directly impacts our mood and what's happening up there. And you mentioned something just then about, you know, when we need energy and wanting a coffee, or it could be sugar. And what I tell people is when they're reaching for those things, or they're wanting sugar all the time, or they're having cravings, is to look a little bit deeper and ask yourself, what do I need? Because sugar, things like sugar affects our neurotransmitters and it's pleasure. You know, when we eat sugar, for a lot of people, it gives you pleasure. So it's like, where are you lacking pleasure in your life? Or where are you lacking the joy or the love or the connection or whatever it is, what is it in your life that you're looking for that's not being met?
Beautiful. That's a
Um,
great line of self-inquiry there. And I
yeah,
think like if people were to hear that and be like, if you can just imagine, like everything in life is exactly as it needs to be, like you didn't need to worry about bills or the washing, or if like everything was just in this moment taken care of, what is it that you really need? And I think it would help people realize like, you know what? I would actually just like to just chill out for a second and just put my feet up. But in their mind, they're probably not even giving themselves the space to even consider that, because they're like, I've got to pick the kids up, or I've got to quickly do this. And so they're just checking off the things that they need to do, task after task after task, that if they gave themselves just the moment or the platform to experience, like, if you could just visualize it, everything was actually taken care of and nothing needs you in this moment, what could you give yourself? And it might be like, a little bit of pleasure. And it could be just, I'm going to put all this aside and I'm just going to go take myself out for a nice walk or catch up with a girlfriend, or just something that brings me joy, because that's actually what I'm really craving here, not the substitute through sugar.
yeah. And that's a big thing I've learned in my healing journey, is that I think as women and mothers and carers, and it applies to men as well, but I think, we see it more in women, is that we feel guilty or we feel selfish.
Yeah.
And really, we put our own emotions under the carpet to keep the everyday things going. But if we
Mm-hmm.
don't allow ourselves moments to have that, then we're ignoring those little messages that our body's telling us. And even if it's only a few minutes, like go outside, kick your shoes off, stand on the grass
Yes.
or lie on the grass and just take a few moments to slow your breathing down. It's just
Yeah.
such a simple tool. It's free.
Mm-hmm.
If you feel like you don't have time, I'm always saying to people, just everyone's got a few minutes,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and you have to consciously make those few moments a priority, especially when you're
Yes.
feeling like you're not coping or you're having a bad day. That's when those things are most important.
Absolutely. Beautifully said. And I think earlier when you were saying that you felt more connected in France, and it just kind of came to me as you said that, over Australia, even though we do, I believe many parts of Australia, we do have an active outdoorsy kind of life, not saying that that's always the answer. But to me, I feel that on some level, the lifestyle in Europe have got it a little bit worked out, where they do honor a bit of a rest during the day, or they have like this appreciation for culinary things and making food with love and deliberation. And they are really connected to the resources in and around them. Is that something that you would agree with, or is that something that you may have felt could have contributed for you to feeling more connected to your spiritual journey there?
I think for me, it was quite different. I think Europe does embody all those things,
Mm-hmm.
but for me, it was where we lived was in a little village, just sort of almost on the outskirts of the metropolitan area. So it was very hilly and there was a lot of forest. And so I would go on walks and I just felt very connected. Like, I suppose France has got a lot of history, and it sounds a little bit funny, but when I was in nature and around the trees and in the forest, I just felt like I was transported to another time. Like I wasn't with anyone. It wasn't it was just extremely healing for me. And I just felt so connected to something. I found it very healing, and I suppose linked to the food and the way of living over there is that there was a fresh food market there, and that's where I learnt most of my French when I was trying to teach
Yeah,
myself,
imagine.
French, and I would go there and they loved it, and most of them couldn't speak, or if they could, they didn't tell me. But, I'd be thinking in my head, oh, how many apples, and I'd be counting on my fingers, and then I'd come out with the wrong number and they'd laugh their heads off. Like they used to really just appreciate that I give it a go. And I think
Tried.
I felt such a connection with those people. But the hard thing was I couldn't speak enough French to sort of be able to convey it in words, but I think they could feel that sort of thing. So I suppose that's what was special about it for me.
Oh, I love that. There's so much in that. Like, I think it just makes you appreciate and understand that we can connect to so many more, we can connect to more things than what we give ourselves conscious awareness of, that we don't like. I guess what I'm trying to say is it doesn't always have to be a verbal connection. You can sense the connection, even though you have a language barrier. You can sense the openness and the warmth, and that can be with a person, or that can be with the environment that you shared that in. And I think that really ties into, like, there is so much more that's affecting us in a positive and a negative way, but in a positive way that can be supportive of us if we just opened our minds up to really be accepting of that, and understanding that it doesn't always have to be in the constraints of what our mind is logically comfortable with. Like, I feel connected because I can speak English or to them. It's like, well, if, we took language out of the equation, we understand that even body language is the most effective form of communication, way more than verbal. And so we can have so much more, I guess, support and, I don't know, like, enjoyment in and around our lives if we just allow ourselves to be open to something far greater than what our minds are logistically trying to make sense of.
Yeah, and that's the key. I think you hit it on the head there, like being open. Like, I find when I sort of have this thought process that the people that I can help will find their way to me.
I see that too.
And, if someone's not open to how I can help them, then I'm not the right person for them. Or if someone wants to be healed from something, if they're not open to certain areas, then they may still have blocks. I suppose I find that most people that come and see me that have had health issues for a long period of time, somewhere in there is an emotional block to their healing. And so that's why I sort of put myself out there to say those things, because it just gets that pattern of thought, that thought process going in other people's minds to go, oh, never thought about it that way. Or
exactly. So in your opinion then, with like your clients that you see, the emotional blocks that they experience that get in their way of their healing, how do you start to, I know you said just then, like, you throw the question out just for them to hear something that they probably haven't considered before. But these emotional blocks that are getting in the way of their healing, how do you help address them, and how do you help get to the root source of them?
I think firstly, it's really about creating a space that people feel safe in. And that's really important to me, because I think it's really important to feel heard. And so I try to create a space where people feel safe to sort of, for whatever to come forth. But initially, I guess it's building up a little bit of a rapport. And so let's say, for example, if someone's come to me with complaining of gut issues and they've got a lot of bloating or pain and things like that, and along the way I might say, how long have you been having these issues for? And they might say, 2 decades. And so then I'll say, what happened 2 decades ago? And it's like peeling an onion or opening a can of baked beans. And then it sort of opens a new sort of pathway for people to go, oh, well, I lost someone, or I went through a traumatic experience, or, whatever it is. And so people don't always necessarily connect the two.
No.
Or if they do, it's almost like such a big thing that they can't begin to process it. And so the first thing is just opening that line of inquiry and sort of gently saying, sometimes these emotions that have not been processed or have been pushed under the carpet for whatever reasons can sometimes hinder our healing. And then it's just putting in little things here and there that can start to bring that to the surface to go, okay, I need some loving, or, what can I do, for myself? Like being, I might say to someone, you need to be more, you need to do some things. Like I say to people, when they're having a bad day, what would you do for your best friend who is having a rough time? And then do that for yourself.
I love that. Yeah, you've got such a beautiful energy. And I think that people would more than likely start to really appreciate that tender space that is being held for them because, yeah, like I completely relate with what you're saying through my line of work too. And sometimes people don't connect the dots, or they're just hoping that if I just address this thing, I can hopefully get over it without actually having to look at whatever that is, because looking at that makes me feel like it's going to be out of my control and it's going to come out and I'm not going to have any control over it. And it's going to make me feel even more, I guess, helpless, or even more, in inverted commas, weak. And it's like to hold that space for them to be like, you know what, this is your body. Please give yourself the grace and just letting this all out and letting this come to the surface so your body can now start to recalibrate. And in this space that we hold for you, we'll always obey with what your body feels the most safest and the most comfortable in doing. And we can go as gentle or we can go as direct as your body feels safe to do so. But just know that we're always going to honor and not push you in a place that you're not ready for, because we don't want to have that, I guess, healing crisis where it's just too hard, too soon, and applying that same sort of intensity with their healing as what they would probably with a self-destructing sort of old coping mechanism that they once had, which they're now wanting to get over.
Yeah. And I think, like you say, you know, there's often this subconscious sort of fear that when those things start coming up, because healing is not, it doesn't feel good. Like when the healing process hurts. And I guess when people start to feel those things, it can almost bring up a sense of fear that they're going to fall apart or that they're broken. And it's not really the case. It's just meeting those things that haven't been met yet. And it's just that it doesn't always feel so good when you're allowing it to come to the surface and to process it. But there are ways, you know, sometimes we don't have to, we just have to allow it and let it come. And you know, it's not easy, but
Totally. It's definitely one of the more courageous journeys. But I think, you know, there's two parts. Like, I think the part of us that have upheld such defense mechanisms and coping strategies, they're the parts that it finds that's the part of ourselves that finds this process quite hard. And I think there's a more innate version of us that's just like, yes, keep going, please. We need this for ourselves. So it's like this instant relief of like, finally, I'm not carrying that anymore. But then the parts of you that have held such a staunch protection and armor is like, what's happening? Like, this isn't how we do this. And I'm like, I feel completely, I guess, overpowered. And it's all those feelings of once used to keep you in inverted commas safe that now have to surrender their guard. And that process is going to feel resistance because it's just going against what's the norm that you've constructed.
That's right.
Right. Yeah. There's like that inner part of you that's just like, please, you know, we need this. Keep going. You've got this. You've got this. So it's like these two little things that play out.
And you do. It's all about having to pat yourself on the back sometimes. Like, you did good today. Like,
yeah,
keep doing that.
Good. Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, I love that. And so when you tie in, like, I think when people come in for you and they're more, I guess, wanting to address like the way that their body is functioning, is that right? In saying they'll be like, okay, I'm not sleeping great. My gut is just like, I'm bloating. And then you start to also infuse this wealth of knowledge that you have. I love to hear what they experience at the end of like a consultation with you and what they feel.
Well, that's a tricky one to answer because sometimes you might only see someone once. Sometimes people don't always share with you. Sometimes people are not open to what you're suggesting. But I guess for me, it's when I get messages, like yesterday, I got a message from someone who's been seeing me a few times who, you know, has always also been on a little bit of a journey, and I've been helping her a lot with her nutrition, but bringing all those things in. And she sent me a message yesterday and she said, I just wanted to let you know that everything's going really well. My markers are good. And she said, they're allowing me to go forward and, do, sort of bring into the thing into my health plan that I want to. And she said, this is all due to you. And so it's nice to get those things because it makes you feel like, yes, I am helping somewhere along the line, so you don't always get
Totally
that validation. And I guess that can sometimes be difficult because, I guess as when you work with people, that's what you want. You do want to help people. But I don't always get that feedback, but I think you can often sense, you get a feeling that people feel comfortable with you. And so I just take those little things to mean that, I think I've started the process.
It was a part of their, made a significant impact.
I do wellness talks, and I suppose I did a gut workshop a few months ago, and a couple of people in that workshop were women that don't drink a lot of water, as many of us probably don't drink enough. But the following week she came and saw me, and she bought a water bottle, and she, just made these little changes. And I thought that's,
totally
one by one. Or I say I like to help. I'm helping people one soul at a time.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's just those little things that you don't often get,
Yeah. Oh, I get that. Yeah. And the thing is that I guess in this line of work, people forget what they once used to struggle with. And because they are so past that now, and their body is not longer holding on to the stresses that had compounded into symptoms, and they're not experiencing the symptoms anymore. And they just get to be living in a life that's more stress-free or more optimal health. And it's just an everyday thing that's become the norm now, that they probably often forget what they once upon a time used to have to live with. And so I totally get that. It's very similar in this line of work at some stages as well, where you're just like, and that's you'll just do and show up as you can in the right intention, one-to-one with that person, and then just trust in their own body's intelligence. Like I've said, there's never going to be a crux where we're supposed to be doing this forever and ever and ever. It's just a part of your journey where we can recalibrate and really help reestablish some more aligned, I guess, inner behaviors and functionalities within your mind, body, and soul. And then from there, go fly. That's the dream in life for everyone, right?
That's right. And I think what you say and what you do as well, the same as me, is we're there really to help. I said to a couple that I had on Saturday is really, I'm here to just help you in being an advocate for yourself. And at the end of the day, that's what it is. We're there to help people along the journey. We don't it's actually the individual that makes those changes to help themselves. We're just there as a
conduit, really.
I don't know. Oh, yeah, conduit. Or a link to walk alongside you for a while you need some support or guidance and stuff like that.
I love that. So true. So, Ange, with people that are experiencing, say, just we'll say with gut health, or noticing there is just some feeling of discomfort within their body that they've now hey, I've been living with that for quite some time. Why come 2 p.m. am I really bloated? Why do I have why am I waking up mentally foggy? What would be, say, I guess, from a nutritional point of view, is there anything that they could start to look at initially, as something to consider?
Yeah, absolutely. Nutrition's always a massive, one of the most important things. And especially if money's involved and people can't afford to get help, nutrition is the first thing that you can do for yourself that's within your control. And it's really, most of us are depleted, and most people are tired and stressed, and they're grabbing things that are packaged that have probably got preservatives and chemicals and been put all sorts of things in. So I would say just look at your diet first. Look at those simple things that you can do yourself and get as much nutrition into your body as possible by eating fresh fruits and veggies. And if you don't like them, start small, make a smoothie or a juice and gradually put less fruit in and more veggies. Sleep is another big one. People are not getting enough sleep. So trying to, just improve your sleep habits so that you are getting more sleep and not running on empty, getting out in the fresh air. Where we're locked inside all the time, nowadays we're on computers, we do a lot of our work and we get caught up in all the things that we're doing. So sometimes just going outside to have a walk or go down to the beach or the park or out in our backyard and just being in nature and fresh air. It's just so underrated. Everyone goes, people go away in winter because it's cold and the weather's dreary because they want that sunshine and warmth. It's no different in everyday life. Like getting out in nature is it's just so helpful. So
totally.
Those, pillars of wellness are just all things that we can all do. Just take charge of your own health, start looking, start educating yourself as to why. And if if you do want to go and see someone, most people will work with an individual. That's what this sort of thing is. It's personalized. It's not a group. And I'm not that I'm saying that group plans don't work. They're amazing for getting information out there to larger groups of people. But when someone comes to see me or, someone's got issues that are not going away, it's really personalized. So you're making personalized changes exactly for that person. And that might be functional testing or things that give us a greater insight into what's happening in the body, dependent on what the individual, would like.
Yes, absolutely. I think we can so many times, especially with new clients, like a lot of my regular clients now are very well versed in it, but just those fundamentals, right? And I think people often allude that their condition is so complex that these simple things like water, like sleep, like right nutrition, like getting out in the sunshine isn't going to help their complex condition. And I would like them to, I guess, just really consider that it can and really dive into how, like, we have got everything that we need here with us. Like, no, don't overlook the fundamental, powerful, natural resources that are readily available to us and really like lean into them more and more and just see your health change.
Yeah. And it is, you have to take control of that yourself. Like when you're trying to, if you do have autoimmune issues or long-term issues, and what we know from a functional medicine point of view is that when people are experiencing a lot of these things or, are on the progression to like autoimmune illness, often they will be experiencing these symptoms for 5, 10, sometimes 15 years before anything will show up on standard blood tests. And so when you start doing these things yourself, it's not like a quick fix. You do actually have to put the work in and, and it can be a mindset thing. So sometimes that takes a bit of
willpower.
Time. Yeah, that's right. So, that's a big part of it.
Oh, absolutely. Well, Ange, thank you very much for your time today. So for the listeners, how can they find you?
So I'm on Instagram and Facebook, mostly probably Instagram's easier. So there I'm at Inspired by You Wellness, and I'm on Facebook as well. And my website is inspiredbyu.net.au for people who want to have a look there. And, if you've got more questions, you can just shoot through an email or a message and I can answer you there.
Amazing. Okay. Well, thank you for your time today. Thank you, listeners. Let us know what you thought of today's episode. If you feel that this could help someone, please forward it on. Send us a DM. We would love to chat and hear what you've taken from this. And until next week, take care of you. Thank you, Ange.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure.
Audience exclusive.